peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to join us this afternoon. It is the 17th of September 2020, a beautiful afternoon here in Nairobi, quite sunny. Yes, we've been enjoying a bit of some sunshine since the beginning of the week, and it's been pretty cold for the last couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much. This is Diaspora Dispatches, where we get to look at the news making headlines across the continent of Africa, even as we look forward to the figures there on COVID-19. Slowly we are we're bending the curve there, and hopefully soon we shall be able to completely flatten the curve. We don't want to fatten the curve. I mean, that will continue going up, but we are looking forward to a day where we shall be done with this COVID-19. So let's just get into it. Look at the news we have today. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and thank you so much, and a warm welcome again. So we start with Uganda, and 7 of the 219 prisoners who escaped from Singila prison in northeast Uganda have been captured. The prisoners shot and killed a soldier who tried to intercept them before heading for Mount Moroto on Wednesday afternoon. Prison service spokesperson said they had deployed 3 helicopters and soldiers on foot to pursue the fugitives. 2 of them have been shot dead. The escapees are thought to be trying to use mountains routes to cross the border into Kenya. And the prison facility, usually with a population of over 600 inmates, has been put under lockdown as investigations into how the jailbreak happened get underway. And then we head over to South Sudan, where heavy flooding has affected 500,000 people in central South Sudan, according to the United Nations mission in the country. The states of Lakes and Jonglei have been worst affected. The head of the mission, David Shearer, told the UN Security Council on Wednesday that heavy rainfall and flooding of the Nile River had devastated parts of the country. And he added there has been an upturn in conflict from the splintering of armed groups. And then we head over to the Ivory Coast, where now the country will not recognize Tuesday's ruling by the African Court on Human and People's Rights that allowed former Prime Minister Guillermo Soro to run in next month's election. Government spokesperson CDT Moke Torres said that the authorities will only recognize a decision by the country's constitutional court, which barred Mr. Soro from elections because of previous convictions. Now, the constitutional court also barred from former President Laurent Gbagbo from the elections on similar grounds. Ivory Coast withdrew from the African Coast Charter in April, and Mr. Torres said the people who should avoid thinking that the way institutions function must come from outside. And there has been protest over President Alassane Ouattara's decision to run for a 3rd term after his preferred successor died in July. And then we go to Libya, where Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj says he intends to hand over power to the next executive authority by the end of October. He is currently the head of the internationally recognized government in Tripoli. There has been a renewed drive by the international community for a new political solution for Libya, with talks taking place in several countries. In his televised address on Wednesday night, Mr. Sarraj called on the dialogue committee to work quickly on forming a new executive authority in order to guarantee a peaceful transition of power. He says he sincerely intends to hand over his duties to the next executive authority by the end of October at the latest, although he did not specify what he will do in the event of his deadline not being met. Now, Mr. Sarraj said that hopefully the members of the dialogue committee will finish their work by then and select a new presidential council and prime minister. He was appointed as a Prime Minister and Chairman of Libya's Presidential Council under the last United Nations brokered agreement signed in December 2015. And then we go to Nigeria, where the governor of Nigeria's northwestern Kaduna state, Nazir Ahmed El-Rufai, has signed into law a measure introducing tough penalties for convicted rapists. The law says those convicted of raping a child below the age of 14 should be surgically castrated and given the death sentence. Where the victim is over 14 years, the law provides for surgical castration and life imprisonment. Female adults convicted of raping a child will face bilateral salpingectomy, that is the removal of the fallopian tubes, and death. Okay, now in rape cases where the victim is under the age of 14, a medical report will be necessary to corroborate the allegations. A child rapist will also be listed on sex offenders register to be published in the media. Very well. And then we go to Somalia, and a military court in Somalia has sentenced a militant Islamist to life in prison for his role in a deadly attack on a U.S. base in Kenya. Fahan Mohamud Hassan was also convicted of being a member of the Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda affiliate headquartered in Somalia. Its fighters across the border into Kenya to carry out attacks. Its fighters cross over to Kenya to carry out attacks, and a U.S. soldier and 2 contractors were killed in January's attack on the base in the coastal region of Lamu. It was first attacked by Al-Shabaab on the U.S. forces in Kenya, which has troops in the 200,000-strong African Union force battling the militants in Somalia. The U.S. often carries out airstrikes in Somalia to target the Al-Shabaab. And then we go to Sudan. The authorities in Sudan have detained 41 people after seizing large quantities of explosive. The material included 4 shipping containers of ammonium nitrate, the chemical which exploded to a disastrous effect in the Lebanese capital Beirut last month. The public prosecutor said the amount had been enough to blow up the capital Khartoum. A spokesman for the security forces said there were fears that dissidents might have been preparing a campaign of sabotage against Sudanese transitional government, though he did not present any evidence for his claim. And then we heard over to Mali, and Mali's ruling junta said on Wednesday that it is making moves to appoint interim president. This comes after West African leaders imposed economic sanctions after the coup, but they appear to have had limited effect so far. Junta meeting with ECOWAS in Ghana, and ECOWAS leaders had given 1 week for a civilian interim president and prime minister to be in place. Wagwe, the junta spokesman, told reporters it could not give an immediate response. A transitional charter approved at multi-party talks says the interim president can be a soldier or a civilian and will be chosen by electors selected by the junta. Now, the ruling junta announced a plan that would allow a military leader to oversee an 18-month transitional period, but this wasn't accepted by the opposition groups. And then we go to Cameroon, where Cameroon has deployed military troops to stop opposition supporters from protesting against the long-serving President Paul Biya. Political opposition and rights groups blame Biya, who has been in power for now 38 years, for rights violations and a 4-year separatist conflict. Cameroon authorities have vowed to arrest anyone who tries to demonstrate against the government. Opposition supporters say at least 12 of their members have been detained since Friday by what appear to be Cameroonian military troops. Cameroon's opposition leaders say the detentions appear aimed at thwarting protests against the country's first regional elections, and President Paul Biya in late August announced the elections would take place on December 6th. And all right, production. We go to Gambia, and the United States on Tuesday imposed economic sanctions on the wife of former Gambian leader Yahya Jammeh, who was accused of corruption during his 22-year rule and is the target of similar measures. Zainab Jammeh is believed to be in control of many of the overseas assets of her husband. That is according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who said in a statement. He also added that the sanctions punish her role in materially assisting, sponsoring, or providing support to her husband. She utilized a charitable foundation and charities as cover to facilitate the illicit transfer of funds to her husband. The former Gambian First Lady's U.S. assets will be blocked, the Treasury also added. Now, of course, Jammeh ruled the Gambia with an iron fist, but fled in January 2017 after losing a presidential election to relatively unknown Adama Barrow, which he refused to acknowledge before being forced out of power by a popular uprising. In 2018, Washington blocked Jammeh and his wife and their children from traveling to the United States. And then we go back to South Sudan, and the Minister of Finance and Planning, Salvatore Garang, and NRA Commissioner General Erdjog Bulen Geu and Nilepet boss Dr. Chol Deng have been fired amid the economic crisis. The men were relieved through presidential decrees readout on the state-run SSBC on Wednesday evening. Salvatore has been replaced with Athian Ding Athian, Dr. Deng and Bol Riang Moruel, and Bulen with Africano Monday. Now, the reasons for the dismissals were not mentioned. However, the developments came after the Economic Crisis Management Committee recommended firing some officials of the revenue-generating institutions over corruption. Last week, both Gerang and Bulen appeared before a parliamentary committee to answer questions regarding their offices. One of the concerns raised by the Assembly Business Committee on Thursday was constant salary delays. And then we go to South Sudan, and we still stay with South Sudan. And Frederick, if you can look at the problem I'm having here, I don't know if they're even aware. Frederick. All right, and then we go to we stay with South Sudan, and South Sudanese have yet to see tangible benefits from the political committees made by their leaders despite the signing of the peace agreement 2 years ago. The United States have said September 12th marked the second anniversary of the deal signed in Addis Ababa by President Salva Kiir's government, SPLM-IO, under Dr. Riek Machar, and various other opposition parties. Now, the U.S. notes that past years have been characterized by widespread violence, sexual and gender-based violence committed with impunity, and the abduction of women and children continues unabated. Aid agencies say more than 1,000 civilians have been killed so far this year alone. Hunger has reportedly affected an estimated 6 million people in South Sudan, with over 157,000 persons displaced since February. More UN reports indicate that South Sudan remains among the direst in the world because of the ongoing conflict and violence in the country. According to the United States, these conditions will continue to be the case until South Sudan's leaders fully embrace the letter and spirit of their own peace agreement. Rodney Hunter, the political coordinator of the U.S. mission to United Nations, mentioned that South Sudanese do not believe that the peace has come to the country because women are still afraid to collect firewood without fear of violence. And I think that is something that we've talked about here, the peace, rather the very fragile peace there in South Sudan. A month even after signing that peace deal, it has still remained elusive there. And then we go to some news from Nigeria, and the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria, also known as MACBAN, Southeast Zone, has explained that its interest in the zone is purely economic, not domination. A top member of the MACBAN in the zone, Alhaji Gidado Sideki, was speaking after a meeting of the Joint Executive Council of the group in Enugu, and he said that the explanation became necessary following growing suspicion and speculation in some quarters. Sideki said that the thinking that their interest in the zone were beyond economic pursuits was wrong, insisting they were in the southeast only to do their business of cow selling. According to him, the suspicion that the herdsmen were aiding and abating Fulani territorial expansionism, oh my goodness, I need some water, was not true, saying such suspicion has created unhealthy relationships in most parts of the southeast region, which he said has made their members uncomfortable. According to Siddiqui, the Southeast people are good people, and the MACBAN would not do anything to create tension in the area. All right. And then we go back to Cameroon and matters concerning Ambazonians or the Anglophones. About 80 persons arrested and detained within the context of the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon are expected to appear at the Yaoundé Military Tribunal on Friday, September 18th. Their various cases returned after they were adjourned last month for lack of constituted parties for some, while the presiding judge or prosecutor in the other cases had been transferred. Meanwhile, members of the ruling CPDM party in Douala, Frederick, I need some help with something. There in the Douala 2 subdivision have requested permission from local administrative authorities to stage an anti-Kamto protest in Douala on September 22nd. A letter signed by the president of the CPDM youth wing in Wari 2 subdivision, Charles Elizang, requests authorization to stage the protest in the New Bell neighborhood on September 22nd. It is left to be seen if their request will be granted after the governor of the Littoral region banned all public gatherings to further notice as a means to foil the protest as scheduled for September 22nd by the leader of the Cameroonian Renaissance movement, Maurice Kamto. It's quite interesting there because the government there has banned all rallies in Cameroon because of the saying of the dangers from COVID-19. So there has been, I think, a protest rally that, the official leadership there of opposition in Cameroon has been planning, and I think we talked about it here. So now there are youths that are in support of President Paul Biya of the CPDM party, that is the ruling party in Cameroon, who are also planning counter-protest rallies to counter that of opposition leader Professor Maurice Kamto that is scheduled to be happening on the 22nd of September, which, by the way, the government have not given a go-ahead. So let's see if at all they will allow, these youth that are allies to President Paul Biya to go ahead and stage their protest. If the opposition is not allowed because of COVID-19, then, the other part also should not be allowed. But let's just see if at all they will be allowed or not. But now the members there, some youth of the ruling party in Cameroon, are also seeking for permission to stage their own protest there. Ina Hassan, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for watching. So, this is just a stage for a lot of chaos there in Cameroon, and we shall be following this story for you. Even as we speak right now, about 80 persons that have been arrested in line with the chaos that have been happening there in the Anglophone region, are expected to be presented to the courts in Yaoundé tomorrow and a military tribunal tomorrow. I still don't understand why civilians are being tried in any military anything. A military court or tribunal is meant to deal with the people from the armed forces. So I've never understood why. As civilians in Cameroon, we've seen the leadership of the Anglophone there, a lot of them, about 10 or how many of them are serving a life sentence, and they were tried in a military tribunal, and the sentencing was made in the wee hours of the morning. So it's quite interesting. This move by the Cameroonian government there. So let's just see. Of course, the cases will be happening tomorrow, and about 80 persons are expected to be in court from the Anglophone region. At the Yaoundé Military Tribunal, it's quite interesting there. And remember, there it's just French. They speak French, and these are Anglophones from the Anglophone region. So it will be interesting to see if at all even the cases will continue, because you can't charge me if even the language you're using to read out the charges, I can't understand. And most of the times, they're not even given interpreters there. So let's see how that will play out tomorrow there in the Yaoundé Military Tribunal. Tomorrow, while they seek to try some youths or some people that were arrested in the Anglophone region following the chaos and the crisis there between the government of President Paul Biya and that of the Anglophones. And of course, the United States on Tuesday imposed economic sanctions on the wife of the former president of Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, which right now I think he is in Equatorial Guinea. Remember, I can't remember the name. Is it Obimba or who? President of Equatorial Guinea. I can't remember his exact name. Such a long name. But, he's the longest serving president in the continent. So Mr. Yahya Jammeh, after he was removed in 2017, he fled to Equatorial Guinea and he's sought asylum there, and he's been having a very comfortable life over there in Equatorial Guinea. So now the wife, I think, They must be having so much, investment in the U.S. For the U.S. to come out and put sanctions on her, that means they perhaps had a lot of offshore accounts there in the United States and a lot of other business interests over there. So the wife has been banned, the U.S. has imposed what they call economic sanctions on the wife of the former Gambian leader, Yahya Jammeh, who was accused of corruption during his 22 years rule and is the target of similar measures. Now, his wife, her name is Zineb Jammeh, who I might also add is quite something there. She's pretty, right? Is believed to control many of the overseas assets of her husband, and he said the sanctions U.S. Secretary of State Mark Pompeo said the sanctions punish her role in materially assisting, sponsoring, or providing support to her husband. Well, she is the wife, so obviously she utilized a charitable foundation and charities as cover to facilitate the illicit transfer of funds to her husband. So those are the claims that are being made there by the U.S. Secretary of State and also the Treasury Department there. So now they have been imposed with an economic sanction. Remember, in 2017, both him and their children and Jammeh were blocked from traveling to the United States. That was in 2018. So I don't know why they were not given the sanctions. I'm sure they might have come with not economics. They're just banned from traveling there, but they were not economic in any way. I don't understand, but there you go. All right, now, so can we talk about this matter in South Sudan, the one I just read here a while ago? Of course, the heavy flooding in South Sudan has displaced over 50,000 people. But also this statement before we even get to South Sudan, Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, remember he was the one who was leading the United Nations-backed government there in Libya. So finally yesterday he came out, he said, it's just too much. I'm willing to hand over. I'm willing to step down to the next executive authority by the end of October. So there has been talks that have been happening. The latest one we were talking about the other time were happening in Morocco. Remember, it is in Morocco that he was, the United Nations backed government was able to be formed in 2015. So the talks went back there. So I don't know, it is out of these talks that really necessitated Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj to say, perhaps I need to step down. I don't know if that is a decision that was made, that was reached at, or maybe was influenced by the negotiations that have been going on between the United Nations-backed government that is led by Prime Minister Fayez and that of the Caliphate Khalifa Haftar, the general there, who has launched an assault against the United Nations-backed government, which I don't understand there, because now, the United Nations-backed government, you would think the members of even the United Nations Security Council will be in support of their own backed government, anywhere in the world. But it is the same members, especially the permanent members there in the United Nations Security Council, who have been very instrumental in fueling or backing even the side of Khalifa Haftar against the United Nations, backed government itself. So it has brought a lot of confusion, and that's why it has become, the issue of Libya all the times. They reach a deadlock and a stalemate because they're not able to agree. And if you're United Nations permanent member there, by the power you have, the veto power you have there, they're able to just shoot down any policy, anything, any decision there at the United Nations Security Council. So that has been a bone of contention in, the process and the peace process there in Libya. And so it has been a back and forth with different interests just playing out there, and the proxy wars, and, everybody just brings their nonsense into Libya. And so they are just addressing their own interests. So it has been difficult to reach a deal. The negotiations always abort before they're able to come out with anything really substantive. So these talks in Morocco, I don't know if it is out of that the Prime Minister Fayez decided was compelled, perhaps, or influenced. Maybe one of the members there said, perhaps it is time you just leave the office and we see if we can put somebody else there. But now he came out yesterday and he said he's willing to hand over power. I think he's had enough of it. since 2015. The war in Libya broke out in 2011 after ousting of the long-serving president Omar al-Bashir, not Omar al-Bashir, that is in Sudan last year, but Gaddafi. And Libya has never known peace since then. We've seen different interests at play there, external factors, and also now the other things that I've mentioned just up there. So I don't know if Prime Minister Fayez Al-Sarraj leaving will now pave way to any meaningful peace talks there. I remember he's being backed by a section, from the Caliphate. General Haftar is being backed by Egypt, by France, by I think Qatar, and which other country? And the United Nations backed government has, especially Turkey, I think, has been on the forefront of supporting. And I think the presence of Turkey there in the recent few months has also now just brought everything into a boiling point. And so it has been a lot going on. You find that Turkey, they have their own issues, these countries, and they just come to flex their muscles here on Libya. So it has been difficult. I mean, it's just too much. Ina Hassan, you're saying the Security Council is captured by nations with different interests. Haftar is supported by France, Russia, Egypt, and UAE. And of course, tacitly supported by the U.S. Of course, the U.S. Because Haftar has United States, what do you call it? He has the nationality. He's been given there, so he has it, the passport from the United States. They give him the nationality, so he has a dual nationality, United States there. And so that has really, really complicated issues. Even when they come out and they speak, really they don't mean well for the general people there in Libya. They're always having their own interests. And so all these factors considered, it has made it I think it's just impossible to find peace in Libya, because as the chaos continue, they get to benefit, they get access to the oil deposits, they get access to everything that they want there, because when there was order, when there was Libya was one of the countries that was doing very well in this continent, they could not the late president could not really agree or serve some of their interests, so they wanted him out there by all means necessary. And we saw what happened there. And the U.S., I think under President Obama, I think he came out one time and said, Libya and what it has become today is just one of his biggest failures as president, and one of his failures in terms of foreign policies there. And so we shall continue to see now that Prime Minister Fayez Al-Sarraj, the United Nations backed government there, Prime Minister, now that he said he's willing to exit, will his exit bring or guarantee some peace process there in Libya? Well, that is something that is yet to be seen. Remember, there has been a ceasefire in the recent few weeks. Both sides have been adhering to that, has been respecting that. But now let's just see. It will be interesting. I don't know if Fayez Al-Sarraj is just tired of the politics that surrounds everything there in Libya, or was he compelled to leave, or he's just exhausted and realized there's nothing much he can do for his country, or he's been told to move so that these foreign powers can bring about another person they can use, of course, to continue advancing their own agenda there. I think, Ina Hassan, it's when you think about Libya, it's just very sad, and it's just one of those things you would think will top the list of some of the key urgent things that needs to be solved in this continent by even the African Union. And African Union has failed countries like Libya, to be honest with you. Last year, when Egyptian President Al-Fattah al-Sisi is there, was the chairperson of the African Union. Of course, he was keen on finding a solution to Libya, and I thought, okay, that will be interesting, because Egypt is vastly, extensively involved in the chaos that is in Libya there. So how is it that now the AU chairperson would even want to find a solution. And we saw they tried twice, to negotiate. I think it was supposed to be happening in July last year, and I think twice or thereabout. But nothing came forth because the intentions there are not pure. The intentions there are not to serve the people of Libya. The intentions there is for Egypt. They believe that the United Nations backed government led by Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, I think they think he's quite friendly to the Muslim Brotherhood. So by all means necessary, when the U.S. hears that, of course, they'll back, they will not be very friendly, or they will not back such a government. So that has been the excuse that they've been using, and they've not come out very clearly to say that is it. But we've seen how that has been playing out. So that has been some of the reasons as to why the Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj has not received a lot of support from those countries. Hassan, you mentioned there France, Russia, Egypt, and UAE. And Turkey, of course, came in and backed United Nations, backed government there. Because we know in Turkey, there's a huge presence of Muslim Brotherhood, and we saw how they even mourned the death of the former Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, when in Egypt nothing was really, even the newspapers were not allowed to put that as a headline, but we saw a whole mass, prayers there in Turkey when that happened, because he's believed to have been a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, or sort of, supported that. So it's just a lot at play. So that story there in Libya, we shall be following and seeing how, he's saying by the end of October, that is next month. So it's not too far away. So let's see if the committee, the dialogue committee, will be able to finish their work. That is what Mr. Sarraj says, that he's hoping that the dialogue committee will be able to finish their work by then and select a new presidential council and prime minister there, so that he's able to just go have his peace of mind. Because how do you have a peace of mind like that when it's just bombings and killings, and I saw the other time Libyans are just out there in the street protesting about the bad conditions that they found themselves in, which is pretty sad there. I think we all know what's happening there. Now let's move to South Sudan, where the prime minister, they don't have a prime minister in South Sudan, but they have 5, vice presidents. I can tell you that much. Now, the Minister of Finance and Planning, Salvatore Garang, and acting NRA. NRA is like the tax body in the country. Ours is KRA. Theirs is NRA Commissioner General Erjok Bulen Geu. And the Nile Pet boss, I don't know what that deals with, Dr. Choldeng, have been fired amid the economic crisis. So there was a committee that was constituted, the parliamentary committee, a couple of weeks ago, that was looking into why, South Sudan has been losing revenue under the cover of COVID-19, and the things that came out. I think I've been mentioning some of these things over and over and over on this show, is that even there are some monies, some taxes that was being collected by specific, officers in the government that were going into personal accounts, was never being remitted to NRA in particular. So South Sudan had hired a person, I think the commissioner there of NRA from Nigeria, and during his tenure, this guy could come out on a weekly basis, or is it a weekly or monthly, and announce how much the country had collected in terms of the taxes there. And then I think that didn't sit very well with the South Sudanese bureaucratic team there, the lords of corruption in that country, the cartels, everybody. When you look at some report that came out that said, even just major generals there in the army in South Sudan are super rich, and you cannot explain how they've been able to accrue all these monies, considering even the state South Sudan is right now. So he was removed, and so another person now from South Sudan was put there, and since then the announcements of how much the country has gotten in terms of revenue, that stopped. So nobody knows how much NRA is making. That is the National Revenue Commission. there in South Sudan. So it has been in the dark. So and then the revenue sort of slipped all the way down, and so there has a committee was set out to look at what's really happening there in South Sudan, and it was found out. So now the Minister of Finance has been removed. Salvatore Garang, he's just one of the powerful people in President Salva Kiir's government, and the acting NRA commissioner also Erjok was removed, and also Nile-Pet boss, Dr. Chol Deng, they all were removed. So let's just see if at all they will agree to that. Usually in South Sudan, when all these people are allied to some militia, the political parties. Do you know, Ina Hassan, that even the ruling party there in South Sudan, even President Salva Kiir's own party and Dr. Riek Machar, they have their own militant groups in that country, and that is just the side. So they will go back to their militant parties or whatever it is, and now they'll perhaps start assault against the government. I don't know, but there it is, and I'm sure we shall be waiting for that reaction there from these leaders that have been fired from the cabinet there of President Salva Kiir. I think South Sudan, South Sudan in the transparency, index, South Sudan is, Somalia leads in terms of corruption, followed by South Sudan. And because like Somalia, it's understandable, the war and what has been going on, the civil war, the Al-Shabaab, all that put together, it has been very difficult to have structures in place that will encourage transparency and accountability and all that. So that's why corruption, it's very difficult, because they're not structures really that you can that are there in place to ensure all the proper runnings and the proper governance are in place. So that's why Somalia leads as the most corrupt country in the world. And then number 2 in that list is South Sudan. And South Sudan, we know over the since the war broke out in 2013, just 2 years after South Sudan got its independence, it had not even put structures in place to start rebuilding their country from the ground up. They just had 2 years in there, so the war broke. So South Sudan never had an opportunity to just put structures in place and to ensure they were able to, ensure the foundations of the new nation were properly in place, and then the war broke there. So also now there are no systems of accountability. The leadership that has been there and the war, the civil war that stopped sometimes after the signing of the peace. But we know the report from the United States. I think the verdict there that shows South Sudanese do not feel very safe still there in South Sudan, and this report says that South Sudanese have yet to see tangible benefits from the political committees made by their leaders. No, political commitments, not committees, commitments made by their leaders despite the signing of the peace agreement 2 years ago, the United States has said. And I think this has been my opinion here, and a lot of us, and even a lot of our viewers there, are from South Sudan, because if you sign this peace deal, I keep asking, why do we still have there's a report that came out a few months ago that showed there were even child soldiers, 16-year-olds, being trained to be part of the country's military. That is just wrong. And why are we still having South Sudanese in the refugee camps? Why is the government still pleading for help for its citizens who are still in refugee camps inside the country? Why have these South Sudanese not been allowed to go back to their homes? Why have their security not been guaranteed, so that they're able to go back and rebuild their lives and start their lives afresh, essentially, So this peace deal and political commitment on this peace deal has been questionable. And so there has been a lack of political will to ensure that South Sudan is set up for more stability and more peace, a more peaceful country in the near future by the leadership there. So the U.S. notes that the past years have been characterized by widespread violence, which by the way still continues, sexual and gender-based violence, which still continues, and they say this violence are committed with impunity, and the abduction of women and children continues unabated, and we report that here every day. So that is I'm not surprised. And according to the United States, These conditions will continue to be the case until South Sudan's leaders fully embrace the letter and spirit of their own peace agreement. And see, when they signed that peace agreement, remember they were botched, deadlines twice last year. Remember, they were supposed to have agreed by last year. Was it in September? They missed that deadline, and then they missed the November deadline, and so they were coerced into signing the peace deal in IGAD, not through IGAD and other, of course, external factors that really put pressure on the leadership of South Sudan through sanctions and all that we were reporting here every day. And so they end up signing up the peace in September, in February. And I was just wondering, now that they've been pushed to sign this peace deal, will they require the rest of the world to be pushing them to honor, this and commit to meeting, some of these things that were set out in the revitalized peace agreement? Will they require IGAD to put pressure on them? Will they require the US to come put pressure on them? And, and I asked that question, and we see that was just on paper. That has not translated to the local person there in South Sudan. So the violence still continues. So what the US here is saying is quite to the T. They're saying these sufferings shall continue in South Sudan until South Sudan's leaders fully embrace the letter and the spirit of their own peace agreement. They must own the process. They should stop making this about all of us, and until we push them, that's when they want to do something for their own people. If they've not embraced that, they've not internalized that, they've not realized the importance of peace themselves, then it will be difficult to take a cow to the stream and force it to drink. You can only take it to the stream. If it decides to drink, well, if it does not, you cannot force it, to drink. So that has been the problem with the leadership there of South Sudan. So I think the US on this regard is quite, I think, correct in their assessment of what is happening in South Sudan. Now, Rodney Hunter, the political coordinator of the U.S. mission to the United Nations, mentioned that South Sudanese do not believe that peace has come to the country because women are still afraid to collect firewood without fear of violence. What a country to live in as a woman, as a child, as a man, because it's not just the women who, of course, they get it very rough, and the children. When you see those images, like there's nothing to smile about the issues in South Sudan. But we know also a lot of abductions, and young men are forced into these militant, activities there. If you don't agree to join, then you're killed and all that. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done in South Sudan, and I think the world is just getting a bit nervous, about South Sudan, because people are getting tired, of pushing. You must want that peace for yourselves, and then it's easier when somebody wants something. So even if you're coming out to help them out, it is their own personal initiative. But that has not been the case in South Sudan, So we've talked about this here before. Vicky, thank you so much for joining. I don't know what you make of this peace process there in South Sudan and these reports that are coming out and these statements by the United States that says that peace will not come to South Sudan until the leadership in South Sudan fully embrace the letter and spirit of their own peace agreement. Not IGAD's, not SADC, not African Union, not the United Nations. Not Kenya, because Kenya has been very pivotal in leading the talks and finding, and even South Sudan becoming independent. Kenya was very on the forefront leading these negotiations. The US has been supporting there. A lot of countries of goodwill have been coming out there and supporting South Sudan. But it gets to a point where you decide, okay, fine, do I want this thing more than this person wants it? Yeah. Does Kenya want this peace for South Sudan more than South Sudanese leadership wants it for their people? Does the US, does the EAC, does IGAD? They can only do much to a certain extent, but I think the South Sudanese leadership must show a goodwill and a will to even want that peace to be sustainable in their own country. So I think that is what I'm the interpretation of the United States when they say that South Sudanese leadership must own their own peace process. It is not for peace in South Sudan is good for the rest of us, but until you want it more than perhaps the rest of us do, then that is the only time that South Sudanese can enjoy peace in their own country. And I get upset every time I think about that peace deal that was signed in February, and we still have people, we still have adverts asking for food and donations for South Sudanese in refugee camps inside their own country. It's embarrassing. So President Salva Kiir should be embarrassed, should feel that his government is failing its own people, and he should do better. Him, Dr. Riek Machar, and the rest of the vice presidents and all the stakeholders there in South Sudan. This is something that should worry them. They should be asking for help to rebuild homes, to settle, the people, to build schools, to get boreholes and all that. When people are in their own villages, so they're trying to, rebuild their lives over there, not in the refugee camps. We are not taking canned food in the refugee camps, President Salva Kiir. That is not what we're supposed to be doing right now. So essentially, the leadership there in South Sudan, you're failing your people. And I don't even know if you cannot even guarantee security for the lives of your people, then you have failed as a government. Because the first responsibility a government has is to ensure their citizens that they are safe, their properties are safe, their lives are safe in their country. And then after that, you work out the rest of the issues. But South Sudanese leadership, that is not even in their top agenda there. You see them fighting about positions. You see them not agreeing about states and the number of states. They finally were able to agree to that, but still the other side was not very happy. So, this peace deal was just upside down. Like, the priorities are just, I can't even tell you, has nothing to do with the greater good of the people of South Sudan. And so it was based just wrongly. It is just faulty from the start. It was not meant to address what is really ailing South Sudan, and I think the aspirations of the people of South Sudan was not really captured, even in that revitalized peace agreement. When you look at it, it has to do with what does this side want? What does President Salva Kiir want? What does, his deputy, Dr. Riek Machar, want? Does the other side want? What does the other generals, Thomas Rilo, who even refused to sign that revitalized peace, do they want? But nobody ever asked, what does South Sudanese want? And how can we address this? How can we ensure that our people are protected? How can we bring back confidence in our people and have them go back to their villages? How can we assure them of their protection, of their security? How can we start making a plan so that we become food sufficient? How can we do that? Nobody, when you look at the issues that they deemed to be very important and of priority, has nothing to do with the people of South Sudan. And so this revitalized peace agreement and its contents there was not to serve the people and find a solution for the people of South Sudan. They should have asked. So it was just faulty. And so that's why we've seen, these two continuing, locking heads. Emmanuel Malwell, thank you so much. It has been a while. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. So this letter by South Sudan, I think it's quite, because September 12th marked the second anniversary of the deal signed in Addis Ababa by President Salva Kiir's government, SPLM-IO under Dr. Riek Machar and various other opposition parties. And since then, as I said there, last year they missed two deadlines until they were coerced to sign one in February this year. But that has not brought any change to the people of South Sudan, because even they were forced to do that. So essentially they require the rest of everybody who forced them to continue forcing them so that they're able to meet the terms and conditions of this revitalized peace agreement there, that now 2 years later, there's nothing to smile about there in South Sudan. The peace deal is just on paper, but on the ground, South Sudanese continue to suffer. And I think we have a responsibility to just speak about some of these things in this continent, especially in South Sudan, because, President Salva Kiir must want it. And I think last year or this year, he was in the country for our annual National Prayer Day, and I think he made an appeal. And President Uhuru Kenyatta was very outright in how he responded very appropriately. And he said, come on now, there has to be a will. Where there's a will, there's a way. So we will be supportive of South Sudan, as Kenya has always been on the forefront supporting South Sudan. Because we're neighbors, we share a lot, even in some communities there in South Sudan and some in Kenya. So we are like very brotherly. We have that in between Kenya and South Sudan, but we cannot want for South Sudan what we feel is right for them more than they want for themselves. There has to be a will from the people, and that is what President Uhuru Kenyatta told their President Salva Kiir when he attended our last national prayers in Nairobi. That happened, I think, at Safari Park, when he made an appeal for Kenya to continue supporting, and President said we will continue supporting. And I think it is during that prayer meeting that President Salva Kiir came out and I think confessed that indeed South Sudan was making a lot of money, but a lot of that money was channeled in fighting before they signed the peace deal. His first vice president there was channeled towards the war that did not benefit anybody there in South Sudan. So yes, Emmanuel, you're saying we are now 2 years anniversary without implementation. Miriam, there is conflicts all over the world except only presidential palace in Juba. All right, very well, and that is what the US is saying here, and I agree absolutely with those statements there, or with that statement there from the United States. Until South Sudanese leadership want the peace and are willing to own the peace process themselves. And then until then, this chaos, as the US is saying, shall continue. These killings, this violence, the rapes, the misplacements, the people increasing in the refugee camps. This will continue until the leadership there in South Sudan wants this peace, and the people of South Sudan. I can't even blame the people of South Sudan. The leadership of South Sudan is the one responsible for what is happening there in South Sudan, and we have to hold them into account. All right, very well. Okay, so thank you so much. So apparently in Mali's junta on Wednesday saying that it's making moves to appoint interim president. This comes after West African leaders imposed economic sanctions after the coup, but they appear to have had a limited effect so far. Now, junta meeting with ECOWAS in Ghana said leaders had given 1 week for a civilian interim president and prime minister to be in place. Wague, who is the junta spokesperson, told reporters it could not give an immediate response. Now, a transitional charter approved at multi-party talks says that interim president can be a soldier or a civilian. I don't know why we need to have an interim president to be a soldier there in Mali. If he wants to be a president, let him step down the way President of Egypt, Faisal al-Sisi, had to step down from his military duties and become the president. Because as long as you're a military president and you're still in military, first of all, you'll never be accepted at the African Union. And I think that will just complicate matters. So if they want to bring a military president, a soldier president, then this soldier has to step down and become a civilian so that he can be referred to as the way we refer to a retired General Major President Muhammadu Buhari, or these other majors that are now retired from active service there. So he has to, resign from active service as a soldier so that he is a civilian, and so he can be chosen by electors selected by the junta. Now, the ruling junta announced a plan that will allow a military leader to oversee an 18-month transitional period, but this wasn't accepted by opposition groups. Why do they want a military leader? Mali is a democratic state, and if anything, and I keep saying here, and I've said it before, President now ousted Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta really was still serving in line with the constitution of the Republic of Mali, had 3 years to go until his second and last term expired. So he was not, in terms of him being in office, had not contravened the constitution there in Mali. So I don't know why the military decides to be very extreme and now feel as though Mali would want to be led by a military. And we've seen there the leaders of the protest, the opposition, came out there and expressed their discomfort with the military junta there, wanting to hold on to power longer than they felt it was necessary. Okay. Samuel Lay, you're saying two can't be right, one is wrong. Who? Samuel Lay, who is that? That is wrong. I mean, between President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, I think they all have a portion there. We cannot lay one blame on the other, because that has been the problem with the leadership of South Sudan. It's just blame games. And so none of them has agreed to take up responsibility. They are both responsible, not just the two, but even the other stakeholders in that. All of them, including Madame Rebecca, Garang, they're all responsible, because they all have a responsibility to ensure that the revitalized peace agreement there comes to effect, and the implementation is done, and a lot of things that were supposed to be achieved by now have not been implemented. So they're all responsible, and we have to tell them that. We cannot lay a blame on one side. They've all played a part, either by being hardliners or by, I don't know, but they all have, and they have to take a responsibility, and they have to realize now, for peace of South Sudan is in their hands. As it is now, South Sudan cannot even go to an election because there are no structures in place yet. So we need that. We need them to get it together so that the country can go for its elections. All right. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Let's meet here tomorrow. This has been Diaspora Dispatches, and we looked at several news across the continent. Of course, that prison break that happened there in northeast Uganda, in a prison known as Singila, where about 219 prisoners escaped. 7 of them have been arrested. I can't even imagine what they're going through now. They were arrested and brought back to the prison, and the rest, I think about 211 have disappeared. What happened? Who colluded? What had happened? I mean, there's a lot of prisoners. What is the state of the prisons there in Uganda? Are they secure? Are they safe? So a lot of things there to think about. All right. Thank you so much. My name is Miriam Mugutu. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you for watching.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.